All right, let's talk about a case that is just profoundly disturbing. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer. But here's the thing. This isn't just about him. What we're really digging into here are the massive, systemic failures that let a monster hide right out in the open for more than a decade.
And this is what's so incredibly chilling. To everyone around him, he was just some quiet, ordinary guy. Shy, polite, But what was actually going on behind his apartment door? It was a level of horror that would absolutely rock the entire world. I mean, how does somebody even do that? How do you live such a terrifying double life?
Well, that whole facade just came crashing down on one night, July 22nd, 1991. An intended victim somehow miraculously escaped and flagged down police. And what they found inside Dahmer's apartment, it was just beyond anything they could have comprehended. The discovery, the arrest, it all happened right then and there.
And then came the confession. Dahmer detailed 17 murders. Just think about that number for a second. 17. This wasn't something pieced together by detectives over years. He just told them. The entire country was just floored, and everyone was asking the same thing. How on earth could something like this happen?
So to even try to wrap our heads around this, we have to rewind. We have to go all the way back to the beginning. We need to look at the path that took this quiet kid and turned him into, well, one of the most infamous killers in modern history. And it really all starts in his childhood.
And when you look back, the red flags are just everywhere. He grew up in a really tense household, and he was always this withdrawn, isolated kid. That isolation then got mixed with this really dark fascination with dead animals, and by the time he was a teenager, he was already abusing alcohol heavily. Every single one of these is a massive warning sign that just got missed.
This timeline really paints a chilling picture of his descent. He commits his first murder when he's just 18 years old. But then there's this 9-year gap, and you might think maybe he stopped? But no, that wasn't a time of change. That was time spent with these horrible fantasies just hardening, growing stronger inside his head, all while he's trying to pass for normal on the outside.
And that brings us to the main killing spree, the Milwaukee murders. For years, he was basically able to operate without any consequences, turning a part of the city into his own personal hunting ground. So the question is a big one. How in the world did he get away with it for so long?
17. Between 1987 and 1991, that was the final, devastating number. 17 young men and boys. Their lives were just gone. The amount of violence packed into such a short amount of time is just staggering.
And you have to understand this because it's absolutely critical to the story. Dahmer didn't choose his victims at random. He specifically targeted people from vulnerable, marginalized communities. We're talking minorities, immigrants, members of the LGBTQ community, people whose disappearances, tragically, just didn't set off the same alarm bells with the police or the media.
This might be the most infuriating part of this whole thing. The police actually had contact with Dahmer. They had chances to stop him. In one absolutely infamous incident, they found a dazed, naked 14-year-old boy who had just escaped. But Dahmer, he just calmly convinced the officers it was a lover's quarrel, and they believed him. They actually walked the boy back to Dahmer's apartment. He was murdered shortly after. It was a complete and catastrophic failure, and when the story came out, people were rightfully outraged.
So once Dahmer was finally in custody, the absolute horror of it all started to sink in, and people needed answers. They demanded justice. The trial that came next, it was about more than just one man. It was really about the entire country trying to grapple with the very nature of evil. And in the courtroom, it really all boiled down to one thing. His defense team's argument was simple. He was not guilty by reason of insanity. They said he just couldn't control himself. But the prosecution? They painted a very different picture. And in the end, the jury agreed with them. They decided he was legally sane, that he knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew it was wrong.
Listen to what the presiding judge said. He called the crimes unimaginable, and some of the most disturbing in modern criminal history. Those words really hit home, don't they? They captured just how horrific the details revealed in that courtroom were. This case truly pushed the limits of what anyone thought was possible.
So the sentence had to match the verdict. He got 15 consecutive life sentences. That's more than 900 years. That means he had to serve one life sentence, and then the next one, and then the next one. It was a way to make absolutely sure he would never, ever walk free again. A sentence designed to reflect the sheer scale of what he did.
But as it turns out, he wouldn't serve much of that sentence at all.
On November 28, 1994, just a couple of years after he was locked up, Jeffrey Dahmer was killed by another inmate. He was 34 years old. And just like that, his story was over. But the questions his case forced us all to ask, well, those were just getting started.
So why? Why do we still talk about this case all these years later? Because the legacy of Jeffrey Dahmer isn't really about him. It's about everything his crimes dragged out into the light. It's about deep, painful failures in our society, in law enforcement, and even in how we understand mental health. When psychologists examined him, they found he had a whole cocktail of personality disorders. Things like borderline and schizotypal. What it all pointed to was this extreme emotional isolation and a deep, deep fear of being abandoned. But even with all those diagnoses, it doesn't really answer that core question, does it? Was he insane, or was he a calculating monster? The jury made its decision, but honestly, people are still debating it. When you really break it down, the system failed at every single step. Warning signs from his childhood were completely ignored. The police had opportunities to stop him, and they just didn't. And the fact that society so often overlooks marginalized communities, that basically gave him a place to hunt. It was a total, tragic breakdown from top to bottom.
But if there's anything positive that can come from such a terrible tragedy, it's this. The case forced a national conversation that was uncomfortable, for sure, but absolutely necessary. It put a huge spotlight on police accountability, on how we treat minority communities, and on the real need for mental health awareness. And let's be honest, those conversations are still just as important today.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why look at something so dark? Well, it's not for the shock value. True crime stories like this are deeply uncomfortable. But understanding them is also essential. Because when we learn to see the patterns, the failures, the warning signs, we give ourselves a better chance of asking the right questions. And maybe, just maybe, we can help stop something like this from ever happening again. And that really leaves us with the one question that still hangs over this entire case. Do you believe that people like Jeffrey Dahmer are the result of mental illness, a broken mind that we should maybe even pity on some level? Or is it something far, far darker? A person who is just evil, fully aware, and in control. It's a tough question, and it really makes you think about the nature of humanity itself. I'm curious, what do you believe?